Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and if you haven't seen on the roadmaps, there is a Liberator update that's tentatively scheduled on the roadmaps for March. They say that the status is currently in progress, which is good because there needs to be some changes made to the Liberator overall. Now, currently where things stand, the Liberator can be incredibly effective when used well. When you've got an organized crew, when you've actually got a solid pilot, and depending on the situation, not every fight is going to be a good fight for a Liberator. The other thing is we still have a little bit of crossover on effectiveness from the ESFs. Basically, there's a lot of roles where the ESFs do better than the Liberator currently does. So sometimes it's easier just to get a couple ESFs in the air. Now, with that in mind, I'm not saying that the ESFs are in a bad place. I think the ESFs are in a good place right now. I just think the Liberator needs some tweaks to make it a little bit better, and apparently SOE agrees because there are some changes that are actually coming. Now, I'm going to kind of run through these and just talk about them a little bit. The first one they have listed is add the crew experience. All passengers in the vehicle are going to get EXP and someone gets a kill and possibly a kill assist. That's awesome. And for anybody that's ever flown around in a tail gun on a Liberator, you do a great job of scaring fighters off and keeping your tail clear. But frankly, there's a lot of situations where people would rather not get in your tail gun because they're not going to get any points, or very few compared to what the gunner and the pilot are going to get. So making a change that makes everybody's experience by getting XP better is a really positive thing, and I'm personally pumped to see that happen. Another thing that's kind of nice is that they're going to be adding an ammo display on the seat diagram, basically meaning you're going to know exactly how much ammo your gunners have. It's not that big of a deal if you're, in Mumble or TeamSpeak or even organized and communicating through the VoIP in-game when it works. But if you're flying with some randoms and people that aren't communicating, it's important to know how much ammo they have. And, sitting over a fight or, circling a fight, only to find out that your gunner stops gunning and then lets you know that they've run out of ammo, isn't a great option. So being able to see that is really, really awesome. Now, speaking of communication, they're actually going to be looking into adding a vehicle-only voice channel. That's fantastic. And especially even if you guys use a third-party client for communications, like a Vent or a TeamSpeak or a Mumble, you have to pull yourselves into another channel in order to actually communicate and not drive everybody else crazy. I can't tell you how many times we've been playing in-game, and you've got 40 people in the main channel, and then you've got 2 Liberators up in the air, so you've got 6 people that are calling out targets all over the place. It gets a little bit unruly and hard to manage unless you're being really proactive. So having something built into the, into the voice comms in games is a really, really positive change if they can make that work. So that's kind of it for the quality of life changes. Basically the things that are nice to have but don't really impact balance overall. Now they're making some certification adjustments. Will kind of change how you kit yourself out depending on how you like to play. Basically, they're saying there's going to be an increased power of stealth, improved afterburner, adding tank shells to composite armor resist, so you're more resistant to MBTs or lightnings hitting you with, hitting you from the ground, and increased racer performance. Basically, kind of like the ESF's got, making the Liberators a little bit faster when you're equipping the racer frame. Now, with these, I think they're all positive changes. And the Afterburner, even, when you kind of start it up a little bit on the Liberator, still feels pretty underwhelming. And there's been times where I don't use it, and I just think to myself, well, that would have been nice to have. But compared to the other options, I never feel like I'm really missing out. Now, stealth, I think, is something that really benefits the Liberators that tend to stay a little bit higher. You can stay off the maps a little bit better. You can lob shells in and hopefully not get spotted. Maybe you could avoid enemy detection. And I don't really use stealth that much, so I can't really talk to you too much about stealth on the Liberator. So if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to weigh in on it. That being said, I like stealth as an option overall. So seeing that as potentially increasing that, on the Liberator, I think that's a positive change. But again, I think we just need to see how it all plays out. Now, as far as the adding tank shells to composite armor resist, maybe I'm a little bit biased because one of my favorite things to do in the game is to shoot aircraft out of the sky with my Vanguard. And yes, before anybody says anything, I know the Vanguard does a better job of shooting stuff out of the air than the Mag Rider or the Prowler do. It's just kind of the part of the faction-specific traits and, I guess, changes between the MBTs. But I enjoy doing that. But from a pilot's perspective, I still don't think it needs to be adjusted. if you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be hit by a tank round, you're probably doing it wrong. Now, there's obviously times where it's going to be unavoidable. Somebody gets a great shot at you from long distance where they can actually raise their cannon up high enough, and the distance kind of makes it a feasible shot. There's also going to be times where maybe you try and sneak in and tank bust a tank, and then you can kind of nose up and then actually finish them off with your Dalton or Zephyr, whatever you've got equipped. That being said, though, you're not going to die from one shot unless you're taking damage elsewhere. So I don't see this as a necessary change, and this is probably the first and maybe probably the first of these things that I'm not real crazy about. So I would like to see this one tuned back. Maybe a minor adjustment, but frankly, since you're not ever going to be one shot with a tank round anyways, I don't feel this is something that needs to be in there. And then as far as increasing the racer performance speed bonus, I think it's good to see that that's being increased on the racer frame only. I think it helps to make it a more viable option because frankly the other airframes are just a better choice right now. And I think this is just one more thing that adds a little bit more diversity to the class. And it's really going to kind of make you choose between your agility and your speed overall. So far, quite a few changes that they're talking about making, and I love seeing the changes because it's exciting new stuff. But you know what's really exciting and what everybody cares about with vehicles when changes are being made is the weapons. So, nose guns are getting some changes made to them. We're seeing an improvement pass on the Vector. Now, the Vector is your stock nose gun that you can use. Now, right now, you really have two choices. You can use the Vector, which just performs like the stock nose guns on the ESF. You fire one bullet at a time in a machine gun fashion, and it's very accurate. Or you can choose the Tank Buster, which shoots off a boatload of rounds really fast. It's not real accurate, but does a crap load of damage. Most people opt for the Tank Buster because it's really effective against tanks. Shocking, right? It's good against other Liberators in fights. And it's also good against ESFs that are dumb enough to kind of go head on with you. Now, the problems with the Liberator fall into the fact, not the Liberator, the Tank Buster, is that it's difficult to use at range. And if you're going to kind of sit back a little bit and want to engage other aircraft or specifically target like infantry on the ground, which you've got a belly gun for, but whatever, you could go for the Vector. Right now, though, it's outclassed and you don't see a lot of people using it. So I'm glad to see that they're making improvements, just again to kind of add to the diversity of it. Now, here's where things get a little confusing. They're talking about adding a new high-velocity Vector. The goal is to make it more effective against air and fast-moving targets. So you think about your harassers and your lightnings that are on the move, easier to hit, also going to be a little bit more effective against air. My question is, if they're implementing this, what's going to separate this high velocity Vector from the stock Vector? Because this feels like it encroaches on the only real role the stock nose gun has. So when they say improvement pass on the Vector, I'm envisioning more damage, larger magazine size, maybe a slight increase in the muzzle velocity. I'm thinking that the high velocity Vector is going to have a big increase on the muzzle velocity, and it probably has to have less damage and probably a smaller magazine size to make the original Vector have some sort of merit overall. Again, this is all very general, so I don't know what sort of changes they're making, but to make a balanced decision between the three different nose guns is going to be interesting to see what they can pull off. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the belly guns, and they're making some changes right now to those overall, the current existing belly guns. Basically what they're saying is they're working on dead zone improvements, which is working to decrease the size of the dead zone. Dead zone is areas that you can't aim at, so I'm not sure how they're going to do that, if it's actually going to be a change to the design of the Liberator, or if it's just going to be a programming change that's going to allow you to have a little bit more flexibility. Right now, you need to be a really effective communicator with your pilot, or your pilot needs to have the instinctual ability to kind of put you in good situations. This will basically make you just a little bit more effective because you can hit targets at a greater range of, engagement zones. They're talking about making a small increase to direct hit damage on the Zephyr. Again, I think that's a good change. The Zephyr's kind of still being outclassed by the Dalton. So giving it a little bit more benefit, again, kind of balances those out a little bit. The Dalton is going to see another reduction in splash damage. That's the other one in here that I'm not real crazy about. We've already seen the splash damage decrease overall in explosives, and now seeing it actually specifically done to the Dalton again, I'm not sure how much more effective it's going to be. Dalton's a higher skill, higher reward weapon, so in general I agree it should do most of its damage on direct hits, which it's effective with now. I'm not let's just put it this way. I'm not a fan of this just because I haven't seen a need for it to be reduced. I'm sure other people have other feelings, but for me, I don't think this is a necessary change unless the sole purpose of it is just to make the Zephyr a more viable option, at which point I think you could make changes to the Zephyr instead. So now that we know what they're talking about doing to the current belly guns, let's talk about new Empire-specific belly guns. And here's where we get into new stuff that everybody likes to see. The VS is going to get a large magazine weapon shooting explosive rounds or orbs. The RPM increases after each shot until forced to reload or the trigger is let go. That sounds crazy as hell, and I like it. But let's talk about that. Shooting explosive rounds or orbs. To me, that sounds a little bit like the PPA. Or I guess you could even say something like the Lasher. I envision it's going to look something like that, and can you imagine being on the ground getting pelted by these things and kind of having the large suppression effect? Again, I don't know if that's what they're going for, but I'm interested to see. I want to know if this is going to be focused on infantry, or if it's going to be focused on armor, or just kind of an all-around weapon. Now, what's really interesting is the RPM increasing after each shot. What it sounds like is you're going to have a max RPM that you're going to reach when you hit the very last bullet in your full magazine. Or if you stop midway through your magazine to reload, you start from scratch with the each shot. That sounds like it could be really kind of crazy and hard to balance unless as the RPM increases, you also see the cone of fire increase. So you kind of get that constant balance of increasing rate of fire, decreasing accuracy. We see that in a lot of guns in this game, and most games really. And I think if that happens with this, I think it could be balanced. But again, it's hard to really say until you know what the actual role of this weapon's going to be. I'm intrigued to see how it actually plays out, and I'm just imagining what this is going to look like on the battlefield. Now for the NC, we're going to be getting the TV-guided missile. And if you don't know what a TV-guided missile, essentially it's like a wire-guided missile that you have a camera on. Think very similar to like the Phoenix. This is an interesting option, and it sounds almost like not really a smart bomb since you're controlling it, unless you're kind of smart. But I'm interested to see how this plays out. This clearly seems like it's going to be fitting a role of anti-vehicle. The question is, how much damage is this going to do compared to the Dalton? I think it needs to have less damage than the Dalton, considering the Dalton takes, the Dalton is going to take a little bit more skill to play for the, the bullet drop and your moving target, whereas when you're actually flying a TV-guided missile, you've got the actual ability to turn and control it midair. That being said, that tends to take a lot more time to go through rounds. So if you drop the damage on that, your accuracy goes up, but your, the amount of shots that you can take per minute is going to decrease. Interesting to see. Something like this may be effective at higher altitudes because you're more consistent, but the longer you're guiding your missile, the more time you're not firing another one. Intriguing. And the last one is probably the more underwhelming of the group, and I've heard some TR folks not too happy about this one, is a Zephyr variant that has a larger magazine and a higher rate of fire. But it's going to do less damage for each shot. And it says each shot increases the cone of fire, allowing it to spray a large area with shells from range. Now, I personally think this sounds like a really effective anti-infantry, just a really effective anti-infantry area of denial type weapon. Now, something like this sounds like a nightmare for camping spawn rooms. I guess the VS's one could kind of fall into that same category. That being said, it is kind of unique, and I think it fits an interesting role. But again, we've been talking about certain weapons encroaching on the roles of other ones. I'm curious to see where this one fits in with the current Zephyr. Is this going to be something that's going to have more splash damage but less direct hit damage, making it fit a more infantry role, where we're going to see the current Zephyr, like they said, it's getting an increase to direct hit damage, so maybe it's going to then be a little bit more effective against armor? I don't know. It's going to be, again, all of this is speculation until we actually get a chance to shoot them. That's how I envision this. This new TR belly gun is going to be more anti-infantry, forcing the current Zephyr to be more anti-ground, but it's also ground armor, but also opening it up and probably being the most all-around option. Then, with the reduction in Dalton's splash damage being very vehicle-specific. Who knows? We'll have to see. I'm kind of interested to play with them just to see what they're all like. Sorry, TR, yours isn't nearly as unique as the NC or VS's is going to be. But again, maybe it can change, and frankly, yours sounds like it could be probably the most effective of the group. And the last one we have here, as I spill coffee all over myself, is we're going to talk about tail guns. And they're making an improvement pass on the Walker and the Drake. Now, the Drake has seen some improvements that makes it a more viable option, but for a tail gun that's going to specifically focus on keeping air off of me, I always prefer to have the tail gunner use a Walker. I'm interested to see how they, improve this. I think, damage increase on the Walker could definitely be effective. Maybe a slightly higher, muzzle velocity, something along those lines. I'm not sure what they're going to do to the Drake. I think the Drake's in a pretty good place, but for an anti-air role, it's just outclassed by the Walker. Now, the Walker's not nearly as flexible as the Drake, so they're balanced out pretty well, but I want to see what they're talking about doing. Again, they're talking about making adjustments to try and give tail guns more firing angles. For those bulldog tail gunners, ground pounders, or even just when you're on the tail gun and you can't hit that enemy ESF that's right behind you, it's a good thing to have more firing angle. So just kind of like with the belly guns, talking about reducing the dead zones. And then lastly, new gun, AA tail gun, heat-seeking missile launcher, similar to Coyote missiles in functionality. Oy vey. I'm not really even sure what to say about this. You've already got a good nose gun, you've already got a good belly gun, and then you've already got a weapon on the back. You're pretty damn well covered unless somebody's attacking you from the top. I don't see a need to have a heat-seeking missile launcher like Coyote missiles sitting in the back of your vehicle. Now, again, Coyote missiles are limited functionality-wise. They're really effective in certain roles. And if you've got an ESF that's right on your tail, this could be really good. I think for these, you would need to have significantly less damage output than the ESF's Coyote missiles. I would also like to see probably a smaller magazine size. Maybe instead of 6, you get 4. I don't know. But if you're strapping the current Coyote missiles setup on the back of a Liberator, I don't think that's a good balance movement. I think that it gets into that indestructible Liberator category. So, that's just my opinion. Again, we'll need to see what actually gets implemented. I love that they're adding something new, and that's what keeps the game fresh, but I just don't think this is probably the best option if it's where it currently stands. And lastly, they're saying they're going to make a pass on ammo capacities. Basically, ammo capacities for most weapons, even beyond the scope of the Liberator, are being adjusted to even them out based on killing potential. So if you're talking about like an infantry farming weapon or a Dalton, maybe we're going to see less rounds that are able to be kept in there, meaning you have to go and get more ammo more often. I think that's probably a good move. I think we all have seen the Liberators that are unkillable, that are just sitting there lobbing shells onto the battlefield, making it really hard, and they're just racking up a ton of kills. And making them go get ammo more frequently is probably for the best. So it'll be interesting to see, especially when they say that it's going beyond the scope of the Liberator. So, what is that going to do to things like rocket pods or your nose gun? But keep in mind, this doesn't even say that they're all going to be lowered. Something like a nose gun, you may see more ammo, whereas something like a Coyote missile may see less ammo. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I like the idea of balancing those out a little bit and seeing what's actually getting an increase and what's getting a decrease. So that's pretty much it for what's on the roadmap. Personally, I'm really excited about most of this, and regardless of whether I like it or don't like it, I'm excited that they continue to make changes to this stuff because, again, it's what keeps the game fresh. So thank you to SOE for trying this out. I'm excited to test it out. I want you guys to all test it out too whenever we actually see this hit the test server so we can make sure that we get that feedback in. I'm going to be doing a follow-up video on some potential new belly guns, just things that I think would be kind of fun. So if you've got things that you would like to see, feel free to add them in there. Even something like Empire-specific bombing variants. Might be kind of fun. Hard to implement, hard to balance, so let's kind of put our thinking caps on and see if we can make an actual bomber, because I think that's something a lot of people want to see, but a lot of people are scared of because of the very real reason that it is hard to balance. So that's it for now. Don't forget to like if you like it, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay tuned for a whole lot more. Talk to you guys later. Take care.